Good evening, everyone. Happy Monday. I hope you guys are doing really well at the start of this week. And I will be welcoming the chat soon. But yeah, well, I feel like it's been a while since I've streamed, but it's only been 2 weeks. But I have missed it. Just to give you guys a bit of an update before I welcome the chat. First of all, does the video look okay? Do I look okay? Does the audio sound good? Is it clear? So any confirmation on that would be greatly appreciated. Until then, I'm just gonna go ahead and wish you a happy new year. Yeah, we're 10 days in, but that's okay. It's still the new year. Okay, so the professor has confirmed that I look and sound great. That's good. That is good. I got a new shirt. This is there's a little bit of black and dark gray toward the bottom. That was from my prof's mom. She gave me a nice shirt for Christmas, so that it's really comfortable too. So I feel like it's a very casual kind of feel. So anyway, we I hope Big Al doesn't get too shy or shies away from my sound engraver rants. There might be some rants today. We'll see, because the more I'm reading and listening about this Mandalorian score, I'm just like, oh, okay. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see how I react to this and how you guys react. But Big Al Presents says, I love the music for the Mandalorian. Very appropriate for the show. So yeah, so we'll get started with a couple of things first, and then I'll welcome the chat. But just a bit of an update. Thanks, guys, for waiting for me to post videos. We had a pretty interesting week last week. We were without power from 7 a.m. Monday all the way to 5 p.m. Friday, and we didn't have power and Wi-Fi together until Saturday noon. So it wasn't really actually that bad once we had the generator going. The lights were low. I had candlelight, and I was playing retro games. I was just gaming most of the time. I was practicing the violin and gaming, and that was pretty much my week last week. And it was great. But once the power was back on, I just started composing again and getting caught up on work. So just to let you guys know, into this week, since I did lose about 5 days worth of work, I'm probably not going to focus on SuperCollider this week. I might not even have a video for Thursday, because I have an extra project I'm trying to get done, and I'm trying to catch up with my composing. We might have a video. It just depends on how the work schedule is going. But we will continue with the streaming, and then maybe pick up on the Thursday, Friday videos next week. SuperCollider, or sound experimentation, or original music. So it's very good to have power again. It's very good to see you guys again. And I hope you guys had some good weather your way last week too. We had about 10 inches of snow. And so that took out a lot of big limbs from trees and power lines and all of that. Also, I think from Daniel Heron, I heard it snowed in Alabama, which actually is not uncommon. It snowed in Arkansas and when I was there. But yeah, we had some pretty rough weather. I'm happy to see some patches of green again, and gravel and all of that good stuff. So that's that first thing. Yeah, let's welcome the chat, and then I'll talk about what we're going to be talking about for the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. So we've got Dr. Y says, this is where the fun begins, or as Anakin would say, this is where the fun begins, Star Wars line that goes through my mind each time I see your subject is Star Wars. And, I thought I was going to leave Star Wars, but it's like, I'm not watching Star Wars either. I'm not watching the new stuff, but I'm speaking from a musician's perspective, a music teacher's perspective, a composer's perspective. This is really going to be strictly music related when it comes to anything regarding the new Star Wars stuff, whether that is something like The Mandalorian or the Book of Boba Fett, any of the new shows coming up. Even though I'm not going to watch the shows, I'm just going to talk about the music if it comes up. If it doesn't, if there's not really anything to talk about, I won't. Maybe a new game. We were talking about the trailer music for the previous game. Just some telltale signs, though, with music, telltale music signs that Star Wars is changing forever. Now, I'm going to give you guys a full, just kind of let it out, and we'll talk about it too, probably from time to time. And I'll get to the chat, I promise. Star Wars is changing forever. Now, there are a couple of camps. I'm going to say there are two camps of fans concerning contemporary Star Wars, Star Wars of today. There's a camp that says, I really do appreciate what Disney is doing. For all the bad that has happened, they're trying really hard to make Star Wars great again. And that camp is following Disney. Now, whether that is true or not, whether the upcoming projects of Star Wars is objectively good or not, I would say it still is changing. It is deviating from the original iconic heroes saga. Just in the way of storytelling, just in the way of writing and storytelling, and especially music. That's my department. So we'll talk about music. So that's the first camp. The first camp is, hey, I didn't like the sequel trilogy, but I'm really supporting what Disney is doing, and I'm going to enjoy it. And I would say, to those who do enjoy the new Disney Star Wars stuff, that's fine. Like I'm not holding it against you. I'm not, begrudging anyone who would enjoy this. I'm just also not afraid to say it's not the Star Wars you fell in love with 40 years ago. It's going to deviate to something completely different 5 to 10 years from now. And if you like that stuff, good. Just enjoy it. But it's not going to be the Star Wars that we had, in the 1980s. As a matter of storytelling and musicianship, musicianship as far as the score is concerned and all of that. So what you loved of Star Wars when Star Wars began is actually going to be, just bear in mind, it will be a very, very different Star Wars going forward. And if you love that, you love that. But that's the camp of people, many channels who are just eating this stuff up, and that's fine. And then there's the other camp who, that I'm a part of, where it's like, I love the old Star Wars, and I can't really partake in the change that Star Wars is making. Disney is making all these creative decisions. I can't be a part of that. I don't say that angrily. I don't say that in protest. I'm not protesting, but I'm just not interested in anything new as far as Disney Star Wars is concerned. So I would say about a year ago today, about a year ago from now, I thought people would be just railing against Disney Star Wars. No, I'm going to take this back. I'm already starting on my rants now. Bear with me. I feel a little discombobulated. About a year ago, I thought people would really eat the Disney Star Wars stuff until another Last Jedi incident would occur. And I was predicting this kind of Last Jedi incident, to be 10 years from now, like 2030, we will have, I'm predicting that we would have another Last Jedi incident where it really does, or really did anger the fans. I actually have come to this understanding that there will be a Last Jedi incident where something of Star Wars, something of the Star Wars legacy is completely tarnished. It's completely uprooted and replaced with something else. But by then, Star Wars fans won't care. They will love what Disney is doing. They will love what Kathleen Kennedy is doing. They will love what Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are doing, and they won't care. Like, so even if you had another Last Jedi incident, 10 years from now, 8 to 10 years from now, the fans will say, "Oh no, that makes sense." So that's kind of what's going to happen. They won't be angered like the Star Wars fans who love Disney now. They won't be angered. You will have another Last Jedi happening, and Star Wars fans won't care because they're like, no, we love the Mandalorian, we love Book of Boba Fett and stuff like that, and that's okay. That's it's like, but it's also okay if I'm not gonna take part of it. So that was my first rant. And actually, I do have fun talking about this too. I'm not like I can't stand what's happening. No, actually, I kind of have. I have a. It's amusing to me to watch all of this stuff. I take it with a grain of salt and I take it humorously too. So let's now with this welcome the chat. All right. And Ace is with us. Thank you for joining. That's wonderful. We've got Big Al wishing me a good show. I hope so. I hope so. All in fun. No matter what I say, Big Al, I know you enjoy the new stuff. It's all in fun. But actually, I do want to talk about something that is a lot more educational when we're talking about the musical direction of Star Wars. And let's see. So if you guys probably have already seen it, it's like under 4 minutes, just to give you a taste of, the Mandalorian score, the theme, the instrumentation and the theme. It's not really a complete theme either. It's more of a musical gesture. Dr. Y says, why do I both like it and hate it at the same time? I can imagine this as music for my own story, but I'm not sure about Star Wars. We're going to touch on that. We are definitely going to touch on what you had said. Thank you. Go Team Ghost Planet. Go times 2. What is this, like the 9th reiteration or change? It was fun. We'll just say last week was pretty fun, but I did miss the streaming aspect. I was planning on talking about this last week. All right, so I think that's everyone. Oh, we got Private Eye. Welcome. Hello there, Sound. What's up? Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you. All right. Is that everyone? I think that's everyone. Okay, cool. All right, and maybe more people will trickle in as we go. I just want to make sure I mentioned everyone, and we'll go back to the comments once I present my case, talking about the music of the Mandalorian. So this is going to be the first stream of maybe 2 to 3, maybe even 4 streams going forward on talking about the musical treatment of Star Wars, but even going a little bit and expanding from that, talking about composers and their compositional approach to new upcoming projects, whether that's film or television shows, and comparing different compositional approaches to people like John Williams. And can you still imitate John Williams? Can we still, are we at this present age of young composers, are we still able to grasp the mastery of John Williams? So if I were to be given the task of composing for Star Wars, I would never compose for Disney, by the way, but hypothetically, if I was given the task of composing for a Star Wars project, could I do it like John Williams? And there is a definitive answer to that. There is a discussion to be had with composers who can imitate John Williams, who have learned from him, who follow him in his methods and his compositional approaches. And then there's this real big break, this real big deviation from this mastery, this mastery top tier level of composition. And this is going to segue into future discussions that I really want to talk about, future discussions about electronic music and electronic music's role in film and television. Now, everything I say about electronic music, you gotta, again, take it with a grain of salt, but you're looking at someone who listens with devotion and passion to electronic music every day. And also, I compose and produce electronic music. So I love electronic music, and I know my electronic music, and I know how it works both from the academics and from just the daily practice of what I do with my digital audio workstation, that's Logic Pro, and also a little bit with SuperCollider. So this is going to be a month of exploring the musical direction of Star Wars and talking about John Williams and why he is so imperative to the musical culture of our time in the context of film and television. And then we're going to talk about electronic music and how it can be integral to film projects and that film TV media or medium, and what could also be risky about including electronic music in television and in film. And we're going to cover a little bit of that with this composer, Ludwig Goransson. I think he's a Swedish composer. I'm actually not sure how you would pronounce his name. He has, I think he has, is it the umlaut over his O? I recognized his name to be Swedish, but I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think it's Goransson or Goransson. I actually have never heard it actually pronounced. But Ludwig Goransson is the composer for The Mandalorian. He also wrote the main theme for the Book of Boba Fett, which I listened to last night, and I gotta say, where's that comment that the prof had? Where did it go? Oh, yeah, it's this. Is that a Gaelic Mandalorian Western now? Yeah, and so if you guys have heard the Book of Boba Fett theme, I meant to actually put it in the link, but I actually don't have YouTube. I probably should put up YouTube real quick. I feel a little safer when YouTube is up. But his theme for the Book of Boba Fett, in fact, actually, 1 second. Let's see. I'm going to put this down. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to be on YouTube. I should just send you the link anyway. So let's go. We're going to do 2 tabs of YouTube. Bear with me, guys. I should have prepared this just a little bit better. Book of Boba Fett theme. You guys can listen while I speak. But the Book of Boba Fett theme is we'll talk about that. We'll definitely talk about that. But we're gonna stick with Mandalorian as well. So let's go ahead and post that. This is the Book of Boba Fett theme. Have a listen. Give me your thoughts. Give me your impressions in the chat. So all right, we're 18 minutes in. So let's get started with the presentation. Making sure nothing's playing. Okay, nothing's playing. Okay, good. We're good. All right. So we've got, in addition to this presentation, I actually have 3 short articles I really want to read for you tonight regarding the process that this composer had when composing Mandalorian. So Ludwig Goransson, what his experiences had been with that, and more importantly, what Favreau and Filoni think of this music, or at least had their first impressions. This is really important with talking about the musical direction of Star Wars. So before we even begin talking about this specific composer, Ludwig Goransson, I want to say it right out of the gate. Star Wars, the music of Star Wars is changing forever. It is changing for good. Not the good, but for good. I just have this in my gut that this is so. And the primary indicators are The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett. Now, actually, the Book of Boba Fett, while the theme has been composed by Goransson, I believe he had a musical assistant by the name of Joseph Shirley. And I think he was the score programmer for The Mandalorian. He was also Goransson's assistant. And he's actually taking the mantle. He's taking up the mantle as composer for the Book of Boba Fett. I have no idea what this music sounds like. I've not seen any scenes from the Book of Boba Fett. I haven't seen any scenes of The Mandalorian either. Just listened to the score that's been long published now by now. So these are the two big indicators that the musical direction is changing permanently. One may debate me, and this is a fair argument. One may debate me and say, well, these are just two projects. How can you be so sure? You know, maybe the Ahsoka series is going to have that old Kevin Kiner Clone Wars feel. Maybe the next Star Wars movie project is going to go back to John Williams. But while I would say you're right to argue that, and you could be right in general, the Star Wars projects like The Mandalorian, especially The Mandalorian, but maybe even the Book of Boba Fett now, The Mandalorian drew so much hype among the Star Wars fans and also among the normies. When you have such a sensationalized project, it's only natural for the showrunners and for the producers and for Disney to say, hey, Mandalorian was great. We need to make that be our monthly cakewalk. Okay. We need to have every project now have that sense of magnitude, that sensationalism. And so it would not surprise me in the very least if everything factoring in what created that Mandalorian show, music included, it would not surprise me that the music would also continue as it's going, as the whole Star Wars production is going forward. So what that means is whatever music you heard in Mandalorian, whatever musical tones and ambience and soundscapes and musical cues and gestures that you heard from Goransson's signature, you can be sure that that is the thing going forward. But I'm going to read you some articles in the near future on even Favreau's own opinion of the music and what this means. So my prediction, no matter how many projects are in the future, even in the near future, for the next 2 to 3 years, if you've got 10 projects, if you got 10 Star Wars projects, my prediction is the music is going to deviate permanently from, actually not even deviate, depart permanently from John Williams. And it's going to follow this line of thinking, which is not John Williams. This composer who composed for The Mandalorian, Goransson, he's from the line of Hans Zimmer. People might think that is perfectly acceptable. But if you understand my meaning, Hans Zimmer sounds nothing like Star Wars. But that is the musical direction going forward. That is my prediction. If I'm wrong in my prediction, I'll mention I'm wrong on a future stream. But that is my prediction. All right. I've got some new people here. I think I saw Elijah, I mean. All right, yes. I don't want to miss you guys at Final Fantasy. Fan 012 is also in the house. I'll catch you guys in a little bit here. So that's my prediction, that it's going to be a complete departure from the iconic Star Wars sound. Now, I kind of want to touch on what Dr. Y said. He was indicating, why do I hate and like this music? It sounds like something that would be good for my story, but does it sound like Star Wars? And that's a really good observation that you made, Dr. Y, because I think this music by Goransson for The Mandalorian can work in a different setting. It can work with a different science fiction story, a different space opera story. It could work with a game, whether that's science fiction or science fantasy, or maybe something historical that churns up that kind of churns up images of something of tribalism, or something of indigenous people or something like that, because it has that indigenous feel. That music's fine for something else. It's not fine for Star Wars because Star Wars was cemented in the iconic orchestral score. Now, you don't need strictly orchestra instruments going forward with a Star Wars score. You can incorporate electronic instruments, but this is going to be a topic on another stream because it's a whole can of worms. It's a whole other can of worms to open and discuss. It doesn't need to be strictly the orchestra, but it needs the depth and intricacy that was presented to us by John Williams, whether that's in an orchestra or with an electronic instrumentation. But if you do not have that orchestration in mind, or the orchestral motion of a score that John Williams presented to us all these years with all these films, then you're losing sight of what has made Star Wars great to begin with. So here are my musical impressions of the Mandalorian score. The first thing I noted when I was listening to this, jotting this down, is the lack of orchestration and counterpoint. Now, this is I'll try not to use too many technical terms or music theory terms when I'm talking about this, but the lack of orchestration and counterpoint, they are two separate things. Maybe composers watching me will say, wait, orchestration and counterpoint are two separate things. So we'll start with orchestration. The lack of orchestration in this score is pretty important to take note. What I mean by orchestration, simply on the grand scale of things, like if you had an umbrella of meaning with the word orchestration, is the interplay, the dynamic interplay and narrative of instruments working together. When you hear classical pieces and symphonic works by the likes of Tchaikovsky or Stravinsky, or something more toward the big band musical field that we hear with people like George Gershwin, when you have that kind of magnitude of interplay between instruments, even the non-musical person will grasp that kind of magnitude. Where orchestration is lacking in Goransson's Mandalorian score is that he's taking a sound, he's putting it in a slot, then he's taking another sound and putting it in another slot, and then he's layering it, sequentially layering it in places where, when I say sequential, it's like, oh, this instrument's going to happen at this time, and then this instrument's going to happen, 2 minutes later. That's not interplay from orchestration we're used to hearing, even in film. Orchestration you definitely hear in the working of instruments and tonal color, really working together in a very cohesive, wonderful narrative in the symphonic orchestra, and in things like musicals and ballets and all of that, and in film, in your classical film setting, like what we had heard from the film noir, the great composers of film noir. Steiner, I think, is one. I'm actually blanking right now on the great composers of film noir, but that classic sound where the whole orchestra is utilized and implemented, where every instrument is important, even if it's ephemeral, even if you only hear a little bit of trombone, but then the trombone comes back in a meaningful way. That's what I mean by orchestration. It's the use of every instrument you choose to have available, whether that's from the orchestra or from an electronic library of instruments, or library of electronic instruments, I should say. But being selective and having this ensemble and working as an ensemble cast, to make a play work, every line is important. Every character's cue is important. If you're missing a character, if they're somewhere backstage and they're not picking up on their cue, the play is ruined. It's the same with musical instruments. The composer must be incredibly selective in his craftsmanship when it comes to instruments. How the instruments blend well together, like what we hear with the Russian composers like Prokofiev and Rimsky-Korsakov and Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky, the Russian composers, if you want masterfully done orchestration and the orchestra done super well, where every instrument shines in its own way, go to the Russian composers. But, working with that, it's not enough to have a piano here. Okay, here's the piano, tu tu tu, and then here's the drums, tu tu tu, and then here's the chime, tu tu tu, and that's unfortunately that's the simplicity of Goransson's score for the Mandalorian. It's I'm gonna work with this instrument, but I'm not gonna really return to this instrument. I'm not. Better yet, I should say it this way. This is very hard to do for a composer, by the way. I struggle with this myself, but it's very, very hard to take a line of an instrument and develop it to something great. It's very hard to take. It's like a plot of a musical instrument. If you introduce an electric guitar in a film score, yes, it can be used as a melody, but if you're trying to bury it in the kind of orchestral electronic instrument sound, you better not just have it done in a rhythmic way or a sound effect way or an ambient way. The master composer actually utilizes that instrument and develops it as if it's the protagonist of a plot. You got to get to act 2 in a suspenseful and meaningful way. Just like with an actual character in an actual story, the composer's responsibility for masterful orchestration is to make sure that that instrument is utilized in the best and greatest capacity. What does that mean? You're developing what you started. You are digressing from what had come before, and then you're recapitulating. It's exposition, digression, and recapitulation. That's the standard classical form that is very hard to implement as a composer. Whether you're composing for the orchestra or whether you're composing electronic music, it is very, very hard. It's a daily discipline for me to develop instruments in a meaningful way. Oh, we started with this. Okay, we got to develop it now to make it something more climactic and something more meaningful, and then have resolution. And that's interplay with orchestration, and there's a gross lacking of that interplay and tonal orchestration with this score. Now this gets into counterpoint, and counterpoint loosely, I'm not really an expert on counterpoint, as a music theorist. I'm not a music theorist. I'm a composer who knows about music theory. But counterpoint is understanding what's in the foreground, what's in the middle ground, and what's in the background, just like it is with a visual painting, and just like it is with a motion capture, for filmmaking. The filmmaker understands the visual foreground, background, and middle ground. Game developers for worlds, not really open worlds, but like a linear progression when the character is going across the screen and kind of a left to right scroll. This is left to right for you guys. But even like, especially the old retro games, but even really good designs now that I see, on Twitter with these game developers, they know how to use foreground, middle ground, and background. So for counterpoint, you've got the background that is the root of something. It's the root that is causing the harmonic motion and friction of something. Then you have a more active melody happening, or you have a mid ground. You can see it actually as bass, harmony, and melody. But even if it's done between two voices, working in a musical narrative, there must be a more important motion happening. So melody is a more important melodic contour that is happening in motion. It's moving. You need momentum. You need more activity in one voice than you do another. So more activity with one voice, you have the foreground, and that's best expressed by a composer with a meaningful melody. Doesn't have to be the only thing, but you do need something that has a little bit more height, that has a little bit more nuance, that has a little bit more activity while you're maintaining a very forward motion in the bass line, in the percussion section, in the harmony. With Goransson's, I think that's how you pronounce his name. With Goransson's score from The Mandalorian, he is using the instruments in a more sound effects way. Whether that's actual sound effects with ambience and drones and things sounding kind of cool, or he's just he'll have something percussive, but rather than have just maybe the low end be percussive, he has the low, mid, and high percussive. So he's not building tension with the nuance, the musical nuance of activity that the people might say, no, that's too distracting for a film. But no, hear me out. John Williams did it, okay? John Williams knew counterpoint, and we weren't distracted by it. His music is so masterful, and we're still not distracted by it in the context of viewing the film. That's amazing. It's amazing to think about it. We could watch John Williams in a concert hall conduct his symphonies and receive it as a complete music score, and then we can listen to it functioning as the score for a film and not be distracted. It's amazing. It's amazing. So with counterpoint, you need a musical foreground, middle ground, and background. Now, counterpoint also deals with linear motion, as I was kind of touching on a little bit before. Counterpoint has a sense of speed to it. So let's say you have a counterpoint of 3 voices. Well, maybe one voice is just a simple drone, and that's very popular in electronic music, and it's very popular with what Goransson does. I hope I'm saying his name right. It's very popular what Ludwig Goransson is doing. Sometimes he has a drone, like a pedal tone. That's fine. That's been implemented since as early as Beethoven, but also with the Renaissance and the drones of the medieval troubadours and the Renaissance period too. You have a nice folk-like drone. So what is that? Well, while it is continuing in time as a drone, as a one-note drone, you need to have quicker motion and interplay with a middle voice and kind of movement, like a choreography of movement between 2 upper voices. This is just an example. It might sound arbitrary, but rather than talk about it in a technical term, in a musical term, you need variance of speed in musical voices. And you can't have that. You don't have counterpoint when every voice is doing the same thing. Now, with his score in The Mandalorian, it's either doing this, these instruments are either doing the same thing when they really should be doing different things and working it out poetically. They're either doing the same thing, or if they are doing different things, it's just different things one at a time. Now, I've done that too as a composer, but you do that kind of sequence and layering as an amateur composer. It's a very amateur thing to do. Now, unless you're Bach and write a magnificent fugue, fugal is like, oh, here's a voice playing one thing. Oh, here's another voice playing one thing. Here's another voice playing one thing. But a fugue starts developing the first voice, while the second voice takes on the first voice's little gesture, and then that develops. And then the third voice takes on another gesture, and then it develops into its own voice. That's the fugue. You have a gesture developing. With this score in The Mandalorian, you just have thing A, dun dun dun, and then thing A1 with a different instrument, or thing A, and then thing B, and then there's no conflict or musical interplay. Like with the story, music must have conflict. It has to have tension and resolve. And I don't know about the score in the film itself or the TV series itself, but the actual tracks, they had the worst resolution, and we'll get to that. So I just wanted to talk about the lack of orchestration and counterpoint, the lack of tonal interplay with a myriad of voices doing their own developmental plots and their own trajectories, and then counterpoint, the lack of variance in speed between the voices. You don't have depth. You don't have the foreground, the middle ground, and the background. You don't have depth there. And then you also don't have depth in the way of temporally getting that activity you need for a film score. It is just more or less ambience. And that actually causes very disjunct transition between one musical idea to another. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, excuse me. The second thing is actually probably more important than the first thing. I should have said this first, but I'm going to say it now. The second thing is the lack of melody and harmonic progression. I hear a little bit of harmony, but the very little harmony that I did hear was not well done. It went from this kind of tribal primitive. There's one track he has where it's like this tribal primitive kind of desert feel, like, with Tatooine. And then it gets into this like French Parisian, is that how you say it? This kind of French lounge feel before it goes into this more Italian feel. Very, very swiftly. Like you wouldn't catch it. Like if someone's not composing all the time or listening to music intently and analytically all the time, you wouldn't catch this as a listener, especially if you're watching a live action, fight scene, for instance. But it went from like primitive to a Paris cafe, like a couple chords of like, this sounds like France. And then why does it sound like Great Gatsby time or something like that? It's like, it was, and it's not that his harmony couldn't work. It just wasn't voiced well. So the harmony that he did incorporate, or I think I said that right, the harmony he did implement, it just wasn't voiced well. It just, I could tell, I was like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was not classically trained, if he did all of this by ear. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Not really, because Joni Mitchell was also not classically trained and had no concept of music theory, and her songs are very good compositions. Some of her songs that I've listened to are very well done, having no education and no formal training. So I'm not saying you can't be self-taught and be really good. In fact, actually, I think it was Nobuo Uematsu who he wrote this magnificent battle theme for Kefka. I'm going to be playing Final Fantasy VI pretty soon. I'm still at the middle of Final Fantasy V. But the battle theme, the final boss theme with Kefka, is wonderfully done. And I heard that he wasn't even classically trained. He just had that good of an ear. So it's not impossible. It's not impossible for a composer to masterfully do something while not being classically trained. But this kind of composing that I'm hearing of Goransson, if he had been classically trained, it was probably very minimal. But I don't think he was classically trained, or having enough education where you can. There's a good way of doing the same harmony and a bad way of doing the same harmony. So maybe you could take my word for it. You guys trust me, right? I've been doing this for many, many years. So the lack of harmonic progression and the harmonic progression that was there was not well voiced. It was not well composed. It wasn't written well. In addition to that, there was no melody. There's absolutely no melody. There are no melodic themes to remember this by. The only thing you can remember really about this score, if you kind of recall to mind, is this bass recorder, this bass recorder doing and it's fine, but that's the only thing that people could really come to mind, whereas people can immediately hum the Star Wars theme. So lack of melody and lack of harmonic progression, in addition to lack of orchestration and counterpoint. The next thing is lack of resolution. There's no climax and resolve. There's, as I said before, there's not really any development that adds tension, that builds musical tension and resolution. And when you do not have that, everything starts sounding repetitive in a bad way. Repetition in music is not a bad thing. I repeat in my melodies all the time or in my rhythm all the time. So repetition in and of itself is not bad, but a kind of repetition that is called for because you're trying to fill in some space, some pockets of space in your music composition, that would be fine, for melodies and harmonies. But if you don't have melodies or harmonies, then you're going to have repetition that really goes nowhere. And again, I have not seen the television show, but the tracks, if you listen to the playlist that is offered on YouTube of the soundtracks, there's like this really strange, almost every track I've heard, there's this strange climax, like the last 20 seconds of a 3-minute track or whatever. There's this climax. I'm like, oh, it's finally developing, and then the track ends. That's not the climax I'm looking for. That's anticlimactic. So as far as the music is concerned, if you were to listen to this on a CD or on a playlist, there is a lack of resolution in this score. You do need musical resolution. You need musical resolution for tension and resolve to happen inside musical sections, and then also to complete the whole musical piece. Even if it's a 2-minute long piece, you still need resolution. If you're going for strictly ambience for maybe 1 or 2 tracks, that's fine. But you still need resolution. Now, on atmosphere, on being atmospheric, I've talked about this, guys. I love soundscapes. I love atmosphere. I love mood in electronic music. And I think this could work in the context of film and television. But with this score in particular, the Mandalorian score, the problem with it being perpetually atmospheric is that it becomes indistinguishable from any other science fiction thriller or horror. Is Star Wars horror? No. Is Star Wars like a thriller film? Well, not really. It's got action, it's got suspense, it's got dark themes to it, but it's not like a psychological horror or a psychological thriller or even like a detective thriller or, people on the run like fugitives. Yeah, I mean, fugitives are involved in Star Wars plots, but it's not, it is distinctly Star Wars. It's not horror or thriller in another sense. You have to make that distinction between Star Wars and another science fiction type setting or another genre. And so the problem with being atmospheric in the sense that it's only atmosphere, there's a little bit of percussion, but there's no melody or harmony or anything distinct. There's no signature of Star Wars. The problem is now you've kind of blended it with any other thing. So if I heard this score, not even knowing it was written for a Star Wars television show, I would think, oh, okay, it's I could see maybe Haywood Floyd from Space Odyssey. Maybe he had an adventure with the Russian or the international astronauts, and they came upon a primitive setting or something like that. Maybe I could hear it that way, but Star Wars, no, no. It can't be strictly atmospheric, even though it involves space and space fantasy and space opera. It can't be strictly atmospheric. So that's I would say just be so I would say have atmosphere, but have it at the very minimum. The next thing I've noticed is the minimal use of the orchestra. Now, we'll see in these articles, we'll get to the chat soon, but the articles that I'm going to be reading in the near future, some express, I had read one express, someone expressed, oh, and the traditional use of orchestra with the electronic music, and it's actually not the case. Unfortunately, the orchestra is used very minimally. It's maybe used for a few tracks out of all the tracks, and maybe there's some climactic points. It's like, oh, okay, paying homage to John Williams just a little bit, but not. It's not using the orchestra like Kevin Kiner did with the Star Wars Clone Wars, Clone Wars films, or television show. So the film and the television show. The Kevin Kiner was pretty solid in his use of the orchestra or the orchestra library with the Clone Wars film and show. I never saw the film, but I did hear a little bit of the music involved, and I'm thinking, yeah, not. It was a little. I would say it was a little rough around the edges. What I heard, but then he spent several years composing for the Clone Wars, the TV show, and he really did master that craft of imitating what John Williams did with the orchestra. Even though it was not John Williams, it worked for Star Wars, and not only that, we had Michael Giacchino, I think is how you pronounce his name. He wrote for Rogue One, and he used the orchestra in a very effective way. Yes, it doesn't sound like John Williams per se, but he used a lot of musical cues of Williams. He used a lot of harmony. He used a lot of the same instrumentation. He implemented the orchestra the way John Williams did, so therefore it did have that Star Wars signature that John Williams first presented. So the problem with Goransson is he was more involved with the electronic side and didn't really know what to do with the traditional orchestral side. And I think he had Joseph Shirley really arrange it for orchestra, and maybe I could be wrong, but the use of the orchestra, it just doesn't have that same signature as John Williams, as Michael Giacchino, I think is how you pronounce his name, from Rogue One, and also Kevin Kiner from the Star Wars Clone Wars film and television series. So it is possible. You could be a completely different person from John Williams. You don't have to be John Williams, but being able to know how to work with the orchestra score. And Mandalorian didn't have that. The Mandalorian, from what I heard, and I heard the whole score, did not have that. At least if it did have it, it was presented in a very minimal way. Unless Joseph Shirley pulled a few tricks and said, okay, guys, we're gonna. Maybe this happened in the television show. Maybe there is more orchestra in the television show, but the actual playlist of the score, the orchestra's, it's like 5% of the music. All right, a couple more things before I'll get into the chat. So those were my musical impressions. Lack of orchestration, lack of counterpoint, lack of melody, lack of harmonic progression, lack of resolution, way too atmospheric. It was perpetually atmospheric with very minimal use of the orchestra, and lack of that intricacy. You know, the intricacies of what John Williams did with the orchestra. You could do that, by the way, with electronic music, but there was a lot lacking in this Mandalorian score, and because of that, it might be interesting as a music score. It might work for something like a game or another kind of world, but it's not the Star Wars signature. It's not that Star Wars signature sound. Now let's talk real quick about the compositional approach. And we'll discuss this in length in a future stream when I talk about electronic music and its role in film and television. But Ludwig Goransson he's very intuitive. He works intuitively. He works with things that he knows and understands, and he's experimental. He's experimental, and one of the things I would say he's become more known for is his use of field recordings. What are field recordings? Well, it probably is what it sounds like. It's you going out with like a Zoom recorder or some sort of handheld recorder microphone, and you just record stuff, whether it's stuff of the outdoors like bird sounds or sounds of a park or city traffic or maybe pedestrian traffic. It's field recordings is taking your handheld recorder or any kind of equipment, the physical analog equipment, and just going outside and recording stuff. And this might not be common knowledge, so I'm just going to put this out there. This is a very common practice among academics and student composers at the universities, and also just composers in general who work in experimental electronic music. It is very common for electronic music composers and producers to go to the seashore and record waves or record rocks or record rain or record car noises. A very common sound in some music that I listen to are children laughing and playing in a playground. And actually I've noticed a lot of composers that I like who maybe English isn't their first language, but they do speak English as a primary language, whether they're Russian or Greek or English, from the UK. They'll record children, like children of different villages speaking of different languages that you just don't recognize as an English speaker. And that's a very common thing. So field recordings is a very, very, very common method. It's a very common pastime for a lot of sound engineers, composers, electronic music producers. And this is one of the main things that, at least from the interviews that I've seen of this man, Ludwig Goransson, this is one of the main ways he composes, is he takes sounds from his field recordings and then he will implement it in the music score. So in the example of the movie Tenet by Christopher Nolan, there's this fire truck scene, and I'm going to say just up front, it's creative, and that's all I'm going to say. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. So what he does is there's this heist going on in the movie, and I've never seen the movie myself, but there's a scene involving a fire truck. And what Goransson did was he recorded taps and bangs on an actual truck, whether that's a fire truck, I'm not sure, but he was actually recording taps and bangs, and then he actually used it as a rhythmic thing. He pitched it down like an octave or two, the original recording, the original sound of the banging on the truck. He pitched it down, I think, 1 or 2 octaves. Then he put a bass note in it, and then he added a side chain that also implemented, I think, a side chain from a fire truck siren or something like that. And so he was expressing the importance of music, of that world, of that scene. Maybe it was in Chicago, I'm not sure, but it involved like a real world experience, like a heist can't happen in our world, in Chicago. So in the streets of Philly or the streets of Chicago, whatever that looked like, he expressed once in an interview that music, it's important that my film score, that my music is coming out of that world. Now that's a really weird thing. We'll talk about that later. But it's very weird to use real world sounds in a musical context of a world we're trying to escape to, even if it's Chicago, even if it's a movie involving Chicago. It's like, yeah, we could physically go to Chicago, in our world and in our reality, but we're still escaping to something that is not of our world, even if it's taking place in a city like Chicago. I don't know if it's Chicago, but kind of look like it. So he in this movie Tenet, actually Tenet I think is a sci-fi. Yeah, I think Tenet is a sci-fi world. So okay, so it's probably not completely of our world, but the he wanted to implement fire truck sounds or truck sounds for a scene involving a fire truck. He also did this with the movie Creed, where he and his team went to a gym and just recorded people boxing. He recorded a boxer, boxing against the mat and against the punching bag and stuff like that, and put it in a rhythmic way. It wasn't actually that wasn't that bad. Actually, he did it pretty well there. The production of that one was pretty good, but the idea of using real world sounds and implementing it in a musical context and a musical score. Now, people who might not understand what's happening, they might think, well, that's a cool idea. What, putting boxing sounds in a music score involving boxers? That's so cool. Putting truck sounds, actual truck sounds in a fire truck scene? That's genius, which I have seen in the comment sections of these videos. At first it's a nice idea, but let's bring it into context. This was done all the time in the academics with electronic music. You're in a concert hall and then you're hearing subway sounds and train station sounds. So I want to give you this example. What if I decided, like, I was given the task of composing for a scene involving a train station, and I decided, well, for my music score, I'm going to take train sounds and I'm going to take railway sounds and I'm going to take, pedestrian sounds and all that. Well, for a train scene, a tense thriller movie involving a train scene, and you got to get on the train before it's too late, or you got to get off the train before it's too late. Now, where would there's a problem. What would the problem be there? Well, you're a composer, which is a different category and a different field of expertise than sound designer. You could be a sound designer and a composer. You could have a mastery at both fields, but they are two different things. So as a composer, what if I implemented a music score of just train sounds for that train scene? Well, where we could run into this conundrum is the sound designer has to also work with train sounds and pedestrian sounds and talking sounds while two people are talking, maybe ADR, like two characters are talking, they're shouting at each other in the train station. That would end up being overwhelming. You've got the sound effects department working with actual train sounds to work with dialogue and then the music score, which is not a music score of electronic instruments or orchestra instruments. It's a music score of train sounds. That is a problem because you wouldn't be able to hear the dialogue correctly. Everything, because I've heard production of this, even bad production of this in theaters, everything is mixed wrong, or everything isn't mixed quite right. There's no delineation, there's no separation, there's no process of elimination where you can get a very hazardous scene and a chaotic film scene and noise everywhere, but you actually, as a sound mixer and a sound designer, can make a chaotic thing still sound clean. Primary example I can think of is the Battle of Helm's Deep. Rather than record everyone fighting at once, and they pulled out all the battle music and focused on an arrow pinging here or sword clashing here. They didn't do the din of the fighting in the Lord of the Rings. They hand selected, and this is perfect counterpoint in the way of sound design. They highlighted a sound that needed to grab your attention. Oh, here's an arrow coming my way. Oh, here's a sword. Here's an axe. Here's shields clanging. And then all that din of the battle is in the background. That's effective sound design. But if Howard Shore decided to do sword clashing for his soundtrack, for his musical soundtrack, it would be overwhelming. Everyone would just be totally exhausted just to watch the fight, you know? The same thing with the train example. I wouldn't really be able to cleanly do a field recording of a train station, even if I manipulated it and added reverb and pulled down the EQ on the low end and accentuated the high end. It would still be train sounds on top of train sounds on top of dialogue. You have to be very, very clever. And what I had heard from the fire truck scene with Tenet, it was really messy. It was really messy, and it was Christopher Nolan just wanting this, just like this really low. He sounds the same every single film. He has the same sound, that same dark, 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 boomy, 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 boomy sound. So, but that's one composition approach that what's his name? Ludwig Goransson. That's one approach that Ludwig Goransson decided to do, is field recordings. So he had done that for Creed. He had done that for Tenet. I think he did it for a couple of other films, and it can work, but it has to be done very, very, very well. So we'll talk about the use of field recordings in another stream when I want to talk more about electronic music in film in general. But I just want to bring up this one point. The problem with field recordings in a musical score and bringing music out of that world or bringing sounds out of that world into the music score so it puts the viewer into that world. Well, the problem is you've just introduced the mundane. When you have an orchestra score, you are pulling the person in. The filmmakers, a lot of filmmakers should be aware of this if they're not aware already. You're pulling the viewer into their world, even if it involves the city of Chicago where we can go to physically. Even if it involves a real world location with a real world scenario, it is up to the filmmaker to pull us into that world and get us out of that world, get us out of our world. The way to do that is actually really with the film score. Orchestra, electronic music, doesn't matter. But there needs to be some suspension of disbelief there. Like, oh, yeah, I think I'm in Chicago, but I'm not in my Chicago, So that's going back to Goransson. That's his first thing. Is his first compositional approach is field recordings. Now, I think I didn't have this in my notes, but I will say another compositional approach that he did was he would lock himself in a room and just record instruments and get ideas that way. Not a problem. I mean, people are at the piano, composing. They're playing on the piano and then they're composing by paper. I think I don't know if he worked with paper. I don't know if he actually wrote down. I actually don't know if he wrote down the score initially. I think it's important for composers to actually write down their themes or their ideas. I think he just put it on a phone and maybe put it on a computer. Yeah, he'd probably record in his digital audio workstation, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when I was watching these different interviews of him, I think he is a guitar player, but the way he plays other instruments is, I would say, just very average. I'm not saying that in a condescending way, but what I am saying is his composition for The Mandalorian, in terms of overall quality, is just about average, because it was, for what I saw of his own recording, it was limited to his own ability to play. So whatever he did on the drums, that was the final product. Whatever he did on the piano, that was the final product. And it's very simple stuff. He actually, I think he partially complain on the video. He's like, "Oh, this sounds so simple. This sounds so simple compared to John Williams." I'm like, "Yeah, bro, it is." And maybe he's saying that in kind of a humble way, like, "Oh," but I'm like, "Yeah, man, it is kind of simple." Yeah, the composition quality itself is just average. In terms of, if you want a composer's opinion, a music teacher's opinion, it is just above average. Well, I would say actually right at average. And I think that had to do with his limitation at his ability playing different instruments. I wonder if he if he stuck with just guitar, he probably could have had an above average score, because I think guitar was his main instrument. Now, does that mean I don't know how to compose for other instruments because I can't master that instrument? No, that's not what I'm saying. But you have to know how to compose for the other instruments. That was part of the composition process as the academics, the part of being a composition student is you had to learn how to compose for trumpet. You had to learn how to compose for trombone and flute and clarinet. It's an education. There is training that is involved. And you only compose if you don't have that classical training or that knowledge or that education, or at least that intuition. Your composition, your composing will be limited to what you know on an instrument. If you don't know how to write it down, and if you don't know how to consult with an instrumentalist, hey, can you do this technique on the trumpet? And if they say yes, great. If they say no, hey, we can't do this, then you actually are limited in the compositional quality, and that your ideas might be too simple. You might not be developing in a very climactic way, in a very meaningful way. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, and I would say as far as overall production, I would give it, so as far as composition, I'd give it a C. His musical score, I'd give it a C, and then overall production, I would give it probably a C plus or a B minus. His sounds, even his electronic sounds, in many, many ways do not orchestrally make sense. They don't go together. There's no meaningful relationships between the instruments. Nothing comes back in a meaningful way. The gesture that does come back, his main that comes back, but in a very half-hearted way. They're just kind of, other instruments pick up that gesture, and it's kind of thrown in there. So I'd give his composition a C, and his production probably like a C plus. So that is my take on the score of The Mandalorian. Now we're gonna jump into chat because I've just been talking about this for about 45 minutes or so. We'll discuss among you guys and seeing what you guys are talking about. And then actually I do want to, maybe I'll save the art. I wonder if I should save the articles for later, for another stream. Nah, we'll get through the chat. I might need to take a break before getting to the articles, but this is really important. This is really important. You might have some sound engraver rants, if that's okay. So let's get back to you guys. Thanks, guys, for listening to me talk for about 45 minutes. So. Big Al says, "Trust me, I'm approaching this stream with trepidation." Yeah, I'm not digging at this composer, or I'm not resentful or anything. I don't have any, like, I'm not. Okay, I'm going to say this. I don't say this with any cynicism, guys, because I don't watch this stuff anymore. So it's like, even if it's completely different as far as musical direction going forward, it's not going to affect me. But I'm just saying, like, it's probably going to happen. Probably going to happen. Yeah. Go Team Go says I look like Steve from Blue's Clues. Yeah, like the wide stripes. Yeah, got some black over here. I love gray and black. I really do like those as colors for clothes. I also like browns and greens. All right. Go Team Ghost Planet says got the Lego Star Wars from the original trilogy in the first Star Wars game. Oh, Game Boy Advance. That's cool. I wonder if that's on the retro box. I don't know if I could get into the Lego franchise. Private Eye says, I believe it was a former anime reviewer who summarized this problem. We have accepted mediocrity. Yeah. Now I will say this score would work for something else. It just doesn't work for Star Wars. It doesn't have the musical range. It just doesn't. There's a little bit of bantering between the Prof and Big Al. You are not late, Final Fantasy. Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Dr. Y says sound engraver. Goransson worked on Black Panther. I definitely got Hans Zimmer Lion King vibes when I listened to that track. I didn't listen to the whole track, and I haven't seen Black Panther because that's just not been in the queue as far as going chronologically. But we'll Prof and I will be getting into that movie soon. From the little I heard, though, I didn't mind that at all. There was a lot more range and potential from the stuff that I heard of the Black Panther. Now, I haven't seen the movie, so I would be a lot more objective once listening to the entire score. But I thought it did work. Now, you're right in that he's imitating Hans Zimmer. He's not imitating John Williams. Is that a problem? No. It's just a little bit of a problem when you're including him in Star Wars. That came from John Williams. If Hans Zimmer had composed for Star Wars, we wouldn't even be having this stream. We'd be talking about something else. but losing that signature Star Wars sound is what is at stake. Elijah Brown says, I listened to the theme. It gave mixed vibes, like folk music mixed with techno. I felt confused. So there's a good way and a bad way of mixing electronic music with orchestra music. And you know what? Just to save us time, this will be a separate topic. Maybe next week, but definitely in a couple of weeks. I'm going to just talk about electronic music and how to approach it. And how do you approach it with film? And how do you approach it with things like you say, Elijah Brown, where it's like, hey, this is folk music, but it's also techno. And that's what Goransson did, as he incorporated it. But okay, guys, I have listened to and I have composed electronic music for over 7 years, frequently, daily. It's been my instrument to practice on top of practicing my violin. And I have listened to all kinds of electronic music, and there are some things that are done really, really well and things that are done rather half-heartedly. And if you knew the potential and the range of electronic music, if you listen to electronic music like I do, you would understand that electronic music has an incredible amount of potential for film and television, but it has to be done well and has to be done right. There's a good way and there's a bad way. And there's a way to mix in, indigenous sounding world music. I hope you guys, I think that was a cable. Hopefully that didn't hurt your ears. There's a way to incorporate indigenous sounding music with electronic music. There's a very smooth way of doing that. Ias Dana, Scantech, Solar Fields, Nictech, Martin on Static, James Murphy or James Murray, like all these electronic artists, Stefan Torto, all these electronic artists have mastered this ability of incorporating the traditional orchestra or the folk with electronic music. Goransson doesn't have that skill set yet. He may, I mean, he's like 39 or 38. He's still young, so he will probably master his craft as he goes, but it's very much a C plus right now. C plus for D plus. I see a Russian bot. Let's block this Russian bot. The election's over. And Eric, what? Can someone block this? Because I can't. StreamYard is not letting me. Okay, I put him in timeout. Oh, that's funny. That's interesting, Elijah. I wouldn't even attribute that theme to the Ewoks. That's interesting. Oh, there's this track from the playlist called Jawas Attack, and it doesn't sound like anything. It sounds like demonic Jawas, to be honest. It sounds like some raven demon possessed them and made them. It was weird. It just doesn't sound like Jawas. But anyway. Oh, thank you, Go Team Ghost. Yes, thank you. Thank you for blocking. Oh, thank you, Ace. Shred does a decent job describing counterpoint and other aspects of theory for fools like me. Yeah, it's hard to discuss music theory when I don't have music in front of me. I would, I don't think my channel needs to be a music theory channel, but if push comes to shove, I don't know why I even use that phrase. Yeah, there are definitely channels out there that are strictly music theory, and they know how to talk about it. I can only really talk about in abstract ways right now. Professor Geek says, this is fascinating. Whether in music, writing, directing, etc., people need to start demanding more quality from their art and stop settling for something because at least it's better than. Yeah, but this, unfortunately, with the music here, this is actually the lowest quality I've heard of all Disney Star Wars has done. Kevin Kiner's fine. I didn't agree with his musical treatment of the Siege of Mandalore. As good as that electronic music was, it just wasn't Star Wars. The Rogue One composer, Giacchino, he's great. They should have got him back. I don't know why they didn't invite him back. Maybe there was like a contract issue thing or a feud, but he's actually the closest who's been to the Star Wars sound. Like, while you're listening to me, guys, go to Google Rogue One soundtrack. Take a listen. Like the first 20 seconds, it's like, yeah, this is Star Wars. Final Fantasy fan says, yeah, that's why we criticize our favorite things in certain media, because we love it. It's also why you need friends who want the best of you. Thank you, Professor Geek. Yeah, I mean, like, I've been, like, I know Prof gets comments on his videos. I know he hasn't posted that frequently because of the holidays and the schedule, but like his recent like He-Man and stuff like that, Masters of the Universe, and he'll get dinged with all these people saying, you're so cynical, you're so negative, stop being negative. It's like, you actually can have an objective critique on something and still have a positive outlook on life. For instance, do I look angry? I'm not angry with where Star Wars music is going. But I will say what's what, It's kind of like, let's say like you're out in a field. Let's say you're a farmer, and you really know how to read weather, and your neighbor farmer says, comes up to you in the field, and you're looking out in the sky, and it's like, we're going to have some drought this summer. Based on what I'm seeing in these next few days with what's happening, I'm feeling it in the wind. I perceive it in the wind. I know we have technology for weather forecast now, but a farmer, especially before all that, meteorology and all that, they knew how to read the signs of the weather. So is it what so let's say a drought comes, like bad weather comes or a storm comes, and the neighbor says, you're just a cynic. Why are you saying these bad things are going to happen? Why are you saying these bad things are happening? Don't be such a cynic. You're so negative. We need more happiness in this world. And it's like, well, yeah, but you can't say the weather's going to change either. You got to be honest. So you know how to best prepare for a situation. Now, the farmer reading the weather could still be cheerful, saying, "Hey, I know we've got a couple weeks. We might even have a summer of drought, but here's what we can do. Take preemptive measures, stock, store, and all that good stuff." And you don't, just because you lay out the objective critique doesn't mean you're negative. It's kind of like when people, Prof had that black pill video earlier a couple weeks back, and it's kind of like the whole term black pill. I don't like. I don't use red pill. I don't use blue pill. I don't use black pill or whatever. But when people say, like the prof is black pilled, or he's being black pilled, or he is a black pill, or however the phrase is, it's kind of now like what people call us, like, oh, you're being just a bigot. It's like, it's so stigmatizing. It's like, I'm not black pilled just because I call out what's what. That doesn't mean I'm negative. So anyway, that was a side rant. We're talking about music. And by the way, Prof and I don't need Disney Star Wars because we've been enjoying Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We're going to be enjoying some of the Marvel movies. We're going to be enjoying some new television shows. We've been enjoying He-Man, Thundercats. We've been enjoying games. I've been doing retro games of Final Fantasy and some other games. He's been doing Batman, Arkham Origins. He's also now doing Kingdom Hearts. I'm going to hang out with him tonight and watch him play Kingdom Hearts. I'm reading Dune. I'm also listening to Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. It's like I'm also writing, and I'm writing music, and I'm producing electronic music. I'm in SuperCollider, and I'm writing a space opera. I don't have time to be negative, actually. I don't have time to mess with the new stuff, besides talking about music. Anyway, that was a rant. All right. This might be a long stream, if that's okay. Are you guys fine with a longer stream? Lynn Green is here, joining in late. Well, welcome. 10:22. Well, that was a while ago. Yeah, Lynn Green, we're going to talk about this. I'm going to talk about this in length on another stream. You don't have to be John Williams to compose for Star Wars, but it helps. As I said before, it's such a can of worms to talk about. Oh my gosh, yes, we will talk about this because John Williams is getting up there in age. It's gonna be an unfortunate passing. Like, I think it's gonna hit us all so hard when finally he passes away. Hopefully he has another 8 to 10 years on him. But he's just given us so much joy and so many memories and all that. You don't have to be John Williams to compose like John Williams, but he took from the people before him. And like those people, we need to treat him as an iconic legend. He is our Stravinsky. He is our Tchaikovsky. He is our Mozart and our Beethoven. A lot of people might not recognize that, but the methods of his composing is centuries old. And he's highly educated and highly skilled, and every composer can have that. But if people start dropping him and saying, no, we gotta do our own thing, we gotta pull away from John Williams, they're pulling away from a very long established tradition and education. And I think a lot of film composers do not recognize this. They don't recognize that this tradition, this centuries old tradition, at least 3 centuries old, is going to die with John Williams. That's what we need to be aware of if we're not careful. Ace says, first example that comes to mind when I think about recording nature sounds and mixing them into something was from the game Spider-Man Miles Morales. Okay, and it can work. I'm not saying field recordings don't work. They can, but they have to be done really well, or you're going to have a lot of mishmash and muddiness. Final Fantasy fan says pretty much a lot of Christopher Nolan's movies take place in Chicago. Actually, I think Tenet is in Chicago. Isn't it like a science fiction dystopia of Chicago? Ace says, didn't Lord of the Rings borrow parts of Dies Irae from the Rings theme? Oh, I know what you're talking about, and I see what you're saying, and I think so. I'm gonna have to check that, but I think you might be right. There's a famous hymn that Christians sing called "This Is My Father's World." It's an old hymn, but it starts as "This is my Father's world." Da 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 da. Well, the first part of that phrase sounds like the Shire theme. Now I don't know if Howard Shore even heard that hymn when he wrote the Shire theme, but that hymn came first. I didn't warm up my vocals. All right. Yeah, yeah, dude. Solar Fields is my favorite electronic artist. I mean, I have a lot of favorites, but he is my go-to for inspiration. Yeah, I bought that album that I shared both on Twitter and on YouTube. The first hearing of it was better. I felt like the more I was hearing it, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm not so impressed. It was a weird experience. That's not true. He's just a master. He does electronic music right. And actually, he composed for that Mirror's Edge game. I think is that PlayStation? Mirror's Edge Catalyst. One of my favorite albums of his is from that game. It's an amazing album. I've been inspired by that album for years. He is a master. He's my like if I had to choose one electronic composer to listen to exclusively, it would be him. So therefore he probably is my favorite, but I have a lot of favorites. Dr. Y says, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed. Anomaly Inc. is one of the best channels to objectively dissect movies. Yeah, I might check that out. I just don't watch a lot of movies to know, but yeah, that's good stuff. Oh, did I skip the chat? Oh, I guess there hasn't been that much going on. Okay. Okay, I think I caught up with chat. Okay, so let me take a quick break. I doubt you can hear my music, so you'll probably just see my little my avatar here like this. See, she's back. I'm gonna go ahead and take just a few minutes just to grab some water. I do want to continue the stream at least until 11:30. It might even be a little bit later. I could do this as a separate stream, but this is all about the same composer and Mandalorian. So now when I get back, we're gonna read articles. They're short. They're 3 articles. They're pretty short about the showrunner's reaction of Ludwig Goransson's musical score, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, and really, really, really important things to talk about regarding their reaction. So let me just take a few minutes, guys. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I will be back. I wish I should have like somehow politely asked Fan Man for his music. If he's not using his streams anymore, the music for his streams. I wish I could do that, but I can't. I'll have to find another way. So let me get back in 2 to 3 minutes and we'll read some articles and have some discussion and wrap it up there. All right. Thanks, guys, for waiting. Hopefully, play the Jeopardy theme. Yeah, I'll have to. I can always check my website and just make sure that works. But last few times it hasn't worked. Oh well. All right. So let's talk about these articles that I bookmarked for this discussion. And let's go ahead. It's good seeing you, Lynn Green. I know you don't catch live a lot, so nice to see you there. Let's share this first one. I think what's the first one? I think this is the one I want. Yeah, I think this is the one I want. I had them in order, so let's share that. Let's see if you can see that just fine. Might not be able to see the actual text, but I'll go ahead and read it. They are rather short. I'm just going to go ahead and read and react and see what you guys think as well. Excuse me. Yes, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni first heard the Mandalorian theme on composer Ludwig Goransson's phone. And Ludwig, I hope I'm saying both your first and last name correctly. I knew it was Swedish. I knew it was that before I learned you were Swedish. There's something I think about Swedish people that they can actually speak English. Like it'd be hard to tell that they have an accent because they just use English so much. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about this. How Favreau and Filoni, what the reactions were when they first heard the phone. So you can see Favreau there and Filoni looking all happy, and the composer looking all happy that he's showing his theme to them on his phone. It's a memorable thing, and I'm not poking fun. I find this amusing. That's all. Since The Mandalorian is a Star Wars spin-off. Oh, by the way, I'm going to be touching on some key points here. Let's read this again. Since The Mandalorian is a Star Wars spin-off, executive producers Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni wanted a score that felt familiar to fans who grew up with the iconic themes of John Williams, but also veered into new territory to distinguish itself from the rest of the Star Wars universe. So they're saying two different things. They're saying two contradicting things. They're saying, well, we wanted a score that felt like it was familiar to the fans who grew up with the Star Wars. But then we also want to veer into new territory to distinguish itself from the rest of the Star Wars universe, which I find very curious because doesn't the Mandalorian take place on Tatooine? So we've been to Tatooine a couple times, once in the prequels, a couple times in the prequels, and then of course Tatooine with Luke Skywalker and his family. So it shouldn't feel too out of place. It shouldn't feel like it's completely new and different territory with Star Wars. That's okay. So the Favreau and Filoni, they were hoping for something that was influenced by the work of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly by composer Ennio Morricone, and various scores from the films of Akira Kurosawa, which I'm actually not familiar with, a filmmaker who had a big influence on George Lucas. They got exactly what they wanted from the Oscar-winning Black Panther composer Ludwig Goransson, who I said who, it's not written. And the first time they heard this was on set from his phone. Next paragraph. The documentary series Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, which I have not watched, continues today by shining a light on the mix of techno-industrial sounds and orchestral magic that make up Ludwig Göransson's score of the series. This is really important. So let's talk about this. The techno-industrial sounds and the orchestral magic that make up his score for the series. Now, two main things. The first is techno-industrial. Those are specific words for a genre. Those two specific words for a genre. Techno is a genre of electronic music. Industrial is a genre of electronic music. They can work hand in hand. They can be interchangeable, but they are separate. So industrial sounds is actually like a composer, we were talking about field recording. You go into this factory or this old abandoned plant, and then you just start banging things. You get that old industrial machinery feel. Now, probably their motive for this, well, Star Wars is about space and it's about machines and robots, right? So maybe that's why. They were going for something that was experimental and futuristic, but even if it's a new setting with the Mandalorian, you still kind of want to go back to what had come before, especially if you want it to be familiar. Now, the mix of techno industrial sounds with orchestral magic, well, that's actually not quite true. He does not intertwine these two things. He uses, as I said before, he does not use a lot of orchestral sounds at all. And when he does, it's not really in the context of using it in an effective narrative way with the techno industrial sounds. This episode has some mesmerizing footage of Goransson playing with his instruments and recreating the pieces of music that make up the theme to The Mandalorian. The deep, haunting whistle from the beginning of the theme, that's a big bass recorder. Ah, it's so amazing. By the way, some of the language of these articles, they're like glassy-eyed. It's like Baby Yoda syndrome. It's like, wow, you did it like that. And I'll say this as a composer and as a musician, when you are a professional musician, or when you're working in music in some professional way, you do attract a lot of people who are just astounded that you could do such a thing. And I'm honored. I'm touched. I have been applauded. I have been praised. I've been complimented a lot of times, because people who aren't musically inclined or musically gifted find musically able people to be quite amazing. Like, wow, how do you get that talent? Or how did you practice that? Or, I mean, I could do something that wouldn't take me 3 years to learn. Like as a kid, I'll play something that would take me from 9 to 12 to learn. And I'll play it as a 35-year-old, and people would say, that's amazing. I'm like, I've got 20 extra years on this. You haven't seen anything. And so people have kind of this glassy-eyed wonder at people with musical abilities, and I'm honored. I'm touched by that. But you're going to kind of hear it in that language as well. It's very common for musicians to get excessive praise and compliments, and it's well-meaning. I mean, don't be a snob and say, "No, that was nothing." No, be courteous and humble. But it's a very common experience for a musician to just get you know you know you know goggly-eyed. Is that the phrase I'm looking for? So it sounds like this writer here, whoever they are, they said, oh, that deep haunting whistle from the beginning of the theme, that's a big bass recorder. You don't have to say big for a bass recorder. And a bass flute, a upright bass, a bass recorder, anything bass, contrabassoon. Actually, I'm thinking of a different instrument. Baritone, bari sax. They're bigger instruments. But it's very interesting. It's like, wow, that's a bass recorder. That's so novel. We're gonna get into this kind of language a little bit later. When he began his work on the Mandalorian score, Goransson created 5 pieces of music, each roughly 5 minutes long, with various themes that represented different characters or planets. He worked on that music for a month, and then he paid a visit to the studio where the Mandalorian was being filmed, and from his phone played the theme that begins with that haunting bass recorder notes. That fans are so familiar with now. Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni listened intently, while director Bryce Dallas Howard watched the 2 executive producers for their reaction to the music. Favreau and Filoni were immediately smitten by the music, proclaiming that it didn't sound like anything they had heard before. I got a problem with that. Okay. If you've not heard those first notes of a bass whether a bass recorder or a low primitive sounding instrument, if you've not heard something like that before, you either don't listen to music, or you don't watch movies, or you don't listen to different musicians of different worlds. Let's just say you're not that well-rounded as a person. I'm not saying the average Joe. I'm talking about Jon Favreau. He's been around, okay? He's got probably a huge net worth. He's been around the world. He's filmed amazing films. He's just been in the know. The how much he's traveled, how much if he's not heard anything like that before, he doesn't listen to music or he's not musically inclined, which is common. I'm not digging at him for that. It's very common for a filmmaker not to be familiar with music. Peter Jackson was up front with Howard Shore. He's like, you know the music. I don't know any musical technical terms. You just tell me what this sounds like or what this feels like. So it's very common for a producer or a filmmaker not to be musically inclined, but to not have heard that before, I can't. No, it's not an unheard of kind of thing. So if you guys listen to that first, I'll just do it. I mean, that's my chair making that noise, by the way. It's a very, it's not unheard of. It's not unheard of. So anyway, I'm just say that. So they proclaimed that it didn't sound like anything they had heard before. Didn't you guys hear Black Panther then? I don't know. Favreau even takes the phone right over to the documentary crew's boom mic and excitedly plays for them to hear it for the first time. He points at Goransson and says, "On a recorder in his bathtub," and the composer adds, "in the woods." And that's just a small sampling of the unique things that Goransson does in order to give his music a signature sound. It's like, I was kind of teasing this with the prof. For someone to be amazed of a composer recording something in the bathtub is this is very common practice for experimental composers. I don't do it myself. I don't do field recordings. I do everything on my computer with SuperCollider and stuff. But it's kind of like that, ogling or googly-eyed, just kind of the Baby Yoda syndrome, I'm going to call it, where people are like, "This is amazing." It's like, actually, it's kind of what musicians do. It's kind of what composers do. You just find different. I mean, has Jon Favreau never worked with a sound effects guy? Like, not one? Like, they do that kind of thing all the time. So I don't really get the reaction of these two people. Check in with the chat, just make sure my audio is good. Oh, am I good? Everything sound good? Okay. It's Wolf10. Hi, Wolf10. We'll get back to you soon. All right, let's get back to that article. Ludwig Goransson's literal wall of sound. There's another sequence in the episode of the Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian, where Ludwig Goransson is standing in front of this concave of walls of switches, knobs, controls, lights, and handfuls of wires connected from one audio jack to another. So this is another thing, like, oh my gosh, look at this whole modular system with the patch bays and all that kind of stuff. So it's more of the visual appeal. I mean, yeah, that wall of the modular synths and stuff like that, that'd be cool to have and cool to work with. The score that comes out of it, though, is not really that exciting. I have friends on Twitter who are composers that work with this, and they do much more impressive sounds. But reading on, this is where Goransson creates the technical industrial sounds that you hear in the score that don't sound like the traditional orchestral instruments. And so this is really parsing, like, oh, guys, electronic music is different from orchestra music, which I know is not commonly known. Like, electronic music really isn't commonly known in the TV world or the movie world. From here, he creates electronic beats Okay, electronic beats, guys. Electronic beats. This is Star Wars, remember? Star Wars. Electronic beats, technological tappings, computerized hums, and so much more, all by plugging in and unplugging the little audio cords, turning knobs, and generally just playing around. It's a literal wall of sound, and you can hear how it's utilized in the track Little Mousy from Chapter 6 of The Mandalorian, the Prisoner. And actually, the stuff that I hear from him, you could do that with an audio workstation. You don't need to work with patches and stuff. I'm not saying modular synthesizing music is not cool. I've seen it really, really well done. But anyway, Goransson, I can't highlight. Goransson was already quickly becoming one of my favorite new composers, and now I've seen how now that I've seen how he works, I'm even more impressed with his unique musical perspective. No one is making musical sounds like this. Beg to differ. Beg to differ. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Mike. There. No one's making musical sounds like this. That is so not true. First of all, the one who is certainly making sounds like this is the most famous guy of them all, and that's Hans Zimmer. He's making sounds like that all the time. But even outside the musical context in film, electronic musicians they're going on tours, they're selling albums. I mean, this person unfortunately sounds like they don't really listen to music. It's kind of like with Favreau. He doesn't, as far as music is concerned, he just doesn't get around, and that doesn't look good. That doesn't look good. He doesn't have to be musically inclined, but enough where he has heard some sound like that before. Anyway, no one is making sounds like this, and that's probably why he's composed no less than 5 scores for films in 2018: Black Panther, Death Wish, Slice, Venom, and Creed 2, as well as doing every single episode of Mandalorian's first season, some other films, and then Christopher Nolan's Tenet. So that's the first article. Let's go ahead and get back into the chat. So just kind of like that amateur, like, I've never heard of anything like this before. This is it. You got to do it. And kind of like bragging, like, this is what this composer did. It's like, okay. Anyway. And don't get me wrong, man. I love electronic music in the modular synthesis form, and then also in SuperCollider, and also in digital audio workstations. I love all music, electronic music, if it's done well. All right, let's take a look at the chat, and we'll read a couple articles. Yeah, this might be a longer stream. This might be a longer stream. Oh no. Lynn says, day 5 of quarantine. Looking forward to being back to work tomorrow. I hope so for you too. Yeah, I bet you're feeling a little restless. Dr. Y says, I like Ennio Morricone's work. That did not sound like Morricone's work. No, I mean, I haven't listened to too much of Morricone, but I'm familiar with his signature stuff. And no, it doesn't sound like these comparisons. Excuse me. I should have muted. These comparisons, like, oh, he sounds like this. It's like, no, he doesn't. Wolf 10 says, just hopped in to say hi, that Ludwig is not the best for Star Wars at all. Oh, hey there, Sound Engraver. I'm kind of agreeing with you, Wolf 10. You also confirm he's most well known from the Creed movies and Black Panther, nothing Star Wars. Yeah, he's not an incapable composer. He knows what to do, but it's just because you can compose doesn't mean your style might, or your approach might be the best for a certain setting. And I hate to say this to people, but Star Wars is a very specific setting. Musically speaking, it's a very specific setting. Asa says, makes sense that The Mandalorian tried to emulate Morricone's style. Show always seemed to like a cross between the spaghetti western and Lone Wolf and Cub. Now, the thing is, that's what they tried. That's what they tried, but you could still have that genre with more of that old style approach compositionally, like John Williams or Kevin Kiner. You can still have that. Now, here's the thing. If this were a separate isolated incident, and it might be, I could be wrong, guys. I could be wrong. If this were a separate isolated incident, maybe this would be kind of an offshoot of music. I don't think though that's the case. I think this is the next musical direction. I wish I could see into the future, at least for this. Revenex, welcome. New music ain't bad, but nothing compared to John Williams' music. Don't get me wrong. A lot of it is dope, but it doesn't give me Star Wars vibes. They should implement JW's music a little bit more. Yeah, again, welcome, Revenex, or Reven 10, whether that's X or 10. Yeah, this will be a separate stream on how you can sound like Star Wars without being John Williams. It's just true. It is true. Wolf 10. It could be. Actually, I didn't even consider that, Dr. Y. Very much could be. I've heard LucasArts Star Wars music sound more like Williams than the current Star Wars content. And yeah, I don't know why people are deviating from that. We'll get into the couple other articles that might bear a little bit of telling there. Star Wars is a space opera, which is why we need a contemporary classical composer like John Williams as opposed to electronic scores. Yeah. Oh yeah. There's so much to talk about. Because I love electronic music. I work in electronic music, but there's a place for electronic music. There is a place for electronic music in film, but you have to be very, very careful. Oh, you guys know each other. Asa says, I also wonder how much industrial music was inspired by Black Sabbath, who out of the industrial town of Birmingham, England, got some ideas of their beats and riffs from factory machinery they worked on. I don't listen to Black Sabbath, but could be. Could be. Okay. I would have, is it Basil? Is that how you pronounce it? Palladori? Conan the Barbarian is Williams' replacement. I'll check that out, the score out. That might work. Yeah, even people who aren't musicians or music teachers or composers, you guys have a sense like this doesn't sound like Star Wars. Yeah. Yeah. Lynn Green says, no one at Kennedy's Lucasfilm wants to connect their product to anything classically identifiable as Star Wars or Indiana Jones. They just want the money. Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. People say that Kathleen Kennedy is there, but she's not part of anything. I'm like, how can that be so? Just saying. Alrighty. Was this a recent passing? I'm not familiar with this composer. James Horner died young too. He died in his 60s, which is really sad. Let's do the second article. I think this is going to be shorter and less commentary on it. I don't know. There we go. All right. IndieWire. By the way, guys, I don't know these news outlets, like if they're shills or whatever. So but it's still enlightening. All right. Can you guys see that? Yeah, you guys can see that. All right. The Mandalorian, how Ludwig Goransson's retro futuristic score created the new Star Wars mystique. Now, by the way, retro futuristic, I love that genre. I love retro. I love futuristic sounding electronic music, which kind of is all electronic music if it's done well. I like that genre. It is at Star Wars. Let's read on. The Oscar-winning Swedish composer channeled samurai movies, spaghetti westerns, and John Williams for a new musical vision. He did not incorporate any of John Williams, maybe for 20 seconds at the end of one thing, but it was even voiced wrong. So maybe I would say poorly voiced. I gotta be kind. By the way, I think these are old articles too, because The Mandalorian has been out for a while. For Oscar-winning composer Ludwig Goransson, Black Panther, tackling the Mandalorian Disney Plus series provided an opportunity to channel his Star Wars-loving inner child while creating a new kind of musical mystique. His deeply personal, exotic score perfectly captures the loneliness of bounty hunter Mando, as well as his determination to protect the child from the client. Now, actually, the thing is, yes, it does. That music does express loneliness of a wasteland and all that, but you could still express that loneliness in a Star Wars signature kind of way. Let's read on. What's interesting is that it's about a lone rider, a gunslinger, said Goransson, who recently scored for Christopher Nolan's Trippy Tenant. And today, in any film or TV show, there are so many stories going on at once. And for this show, you're just following one man and his perspective the whole time. And you don't get his facial expressions because he's wearing a helmet. So I knew that there was a lot of ground to cover with different music, which is essentially what I tried to convey. I think he was trying to convey musical nuances to depict the Mandalorian's mood because you don't see his face. I get that. That's actually a very good intuitive thing to do. When the Swedish composer first met with Jon Favreau in his LA office during the pre-production to discuss the showrunner's vision for The Mandalorian, he soaked up the stunning visual concept art from the Industrial Light and Magic while discussing the concept of incorporating Akira Kurosawa's samurai movies with Leone's spaghetti westerns. Musically, that enabled Goransson to think about channeling the offbeat scores of music composers of Sato and Morricone for, listen to this, for this dystopian Star Wars world, finding his own signature sounds. Guys, I said this before, Star Wars does not need to be dystopian. For goodness sake, you had an empire running the stage for 25 years and it still wasn't a dystopian feel. It was still very much a kind of a campy adventure thriller feel. It's action, it's adventure, it's space opera, but it's not dystopian. It has dark themes in it, but it's not dystopian. So I don't know if that's a general direction that people are wanting Star Wars to go as well, but yeah, that was a shorter one. But yeah, pretty interesting there. A lot of intuitive cues that the composer took. But again, like talking about this Japanese composer, or not composer, this filmmaker, and then also Morricone, it's like, does Jon Favreau really know what sounds like Morricone or what sounds like this other Japanese filmmaker, which I'm not familiar with? It's like, oh, I like the look of it. He might know about pacing and narrative and storytelling of these people in the films that they've been involved with. But as far as music is concerned, no, you have to know what is quite different, what distinguishes these people from one another. I'd have to look that up to see what I like the best. But Mask of Zorro, I will say is a good candidate. I have to hear it though first all the way. Yeah, Wolf 10 is right. The music has to have at least the spirit, the passing on, the mantle of John Williams. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Oh yeah, Jerry Goldsmith probably. Yeah, I know these composers just they pass away. Oh. All right. Wolf 10 says Star Wars, it was never dystopian. It's an expansive world, not a dystopian. You can set it in one of the worlds that could be a dystopian world, but the universe as a whole is not dystopian. Well, even if but because of the immensity of space travel and how frequent that happens, even in a dystopian world, would not have the dystopian context like Hunger Games or something like that. Because the characters have a way of space travel and have a way of getting to different places, even if they're stuck on the planet. I can't imagine. And by the way, Tatooine is harsh, and it's got thugs and stuff, but and gangs, but it's not dystopian. Parts of Star Wars are dystopian, not the films, simply because they don't have the show much of the Empire, but definitely parts of the TV shows and novels are dystopian. I mean, you go into the detail of the Empire, but I still don't have the dystopian feel, like an actual dystopian novel. But again, I haven't read all the EU either, so I could be wrong. But the general, like the general story that most audience, many people partake in, shouldn't be dystopian. I know the prof did a book study on the horror, the Red Harvest or whatever it was called, like based on horror. I didn't get into that because I'm not into horror. All right, so let's go ahead and read the last one, some indicators as well, and then we'll wrap it up. And thank you guys for listening. It's pretty good discussion. I feel like there's more to talk about, but we just don't have time tonight to talk about on the stream. But fear not, we're going to be probably going along this theme for the remainder of the month at least. So let's share one more thing. Oh, let's go up. Okay. Laughing Place. What we learned from Disney Gallery, The Mandalorian Episode 7 score. I probably should have watched this before doing this presentation, but I didn't really want to. I don't want to go. I have not been on Disney Plus in a long time. All right, so here's of course Favreau and then the film composer Goransson. Hello and welcome to Laughing Place's weekly recap of behind-the-scenes docuseries Disney's Gallery, The Mandalorian on Disney+. This week's new episode represents the series' penultimate installment and focuses exclusively on the creator of the acclaimed musical score, The Mandalorian, a multi-talented, probably multi-instrumentalist is what that means, by the multi-talented composer Ludwig Goransson. In the bullet point list below, I've gone through the episode and selected the most fascinating tidbits and factoids we learned during this very interesting half hour. I probably should have watched this just to see if I could pick up anything else. But I just love this picture here. Now, I am not making fun, but I just love that there's a composer with staff paper. And I don't know if that's an actual sketch on the staff paper or if that's a print of the staff paper. But I love that there are no notes. Like, so there's no proof that I know if he writes music. You kind of want to show your work a little bit. I was just saying, I was like, no, but this is cool. It's a sketch of the Mandalorian on music staff paper. It's like, well, where are the notes? Anyway, here are the bullet points. One of the first things Goransson did when he started scoring The Mandalorian was to order a kit of recorders through the mail, some of which he hadn't played before. He then read the scripts for the series and closed himself off in his studio for a month with his instruments and no computers. After the flute, he added drums, piano, guitar to help flesh out the music. Goransson was recommended to the Mandalorian creator and showrunner Jon Favreau by Black Panther director Ryan Coogler and The Lion King star Donald Glover. In addition to composing music for films, Goransson also collaborates with hip-hop artists and appeared as himself in the 2013 Childish Gambino short for Clapping for the Wrong Reasons. Okay, this is important. Favreau and executive producer Dave Filoni wanted to bring a dystopian twist to the Mandalorian score on top of the established Star Wars sound. Now, when I first read that, I was like, oh yeah, it's on top of the established Star Wars sound. It's so on top of the Star Wars sound that it's buried. You can't even hear it because it's not there. Anyway. As reference points, Goransson was given famed spaghetti western composer Ennio Morricone and the traditional non-traditional scores for Japanese director Akira Kurosawa's films, as Favreau described The Mandalorian as a samurai/western show. Now, I haven't seen it, so I don't know if he succeeded in bringing about that genre. Favreau and Filoni also told Goransson to have fun with it, but they say they wouldn't have said that if they didn't already like what he was doing. So he's like giving him affirmations because composers need affirmations. This one here is interesting. Goransson also served as producer for the show's music and digital tools to shape the sound. So he was in charge of the equipment, but he did, according to IMDb, he did have Joseph Shirley as an assistant, which means, okay, oh, we should probably talk about this before wrapping it up. So I said earlier in the stream that Joseph Shirley is now the composer for the Boba Fett series, the Book of Boba Fett, but he served as Goransson's assistant, which means I have a feeling that he transcribed Goransson's recordings to the orchestra. I don't know if Goransson transcribed himself. Now, is that a dig at him? I don't think so, because Howard Shore had a team of transcribers. It's very common for a composer for film to write down something, like sketch it on a piano or recording, and then have professional music copyists and transcribers and arrangers do that for the orchestra. So it's not a dig at him, but I do wonder if he really strictly did recording. I'd be kind of curious, or if he actually did write these melodies down, just as a sketch, not even as a professional music copy score. A few more bullet points. Goransson visited the set of The Mandalorian during the production and played Favreau, Filoni, and Dallas Howard 5 themes from his proposal for the score. They immediately loved his work. Now, this is very, very, very interesting coming up. Quote by Goransson: "You can't do music for Star Wars without working on something that looks like a robot." So out of all those movies that John Williams did, which had no synthesizers, guys, the originals, and I don't think the prequels, I would have to hear the prequels again, but I don't think John Williams ever used any type of synthesizer, analog or digital, for his Star Wars scores. So that's really weird. Like he cannot separate. He can't. This is his field recording mentality. He can't separate the Star Wars world from his world. And you have to, as a composer, as a writer, as a filmmaker, as an actor, you have to. When you act your character, you're not you anymore, and you're in real life, you're not your character. You know, it's like if your character works for the mafia, do you work for the mafia? No. Now I know that's a dramatic comparison, but this is very weird as far as mentality is concerned. It's like that's his mindset. It's like, I can't work on music for Star Wars without working on something that looks like a robot, because it's Star Wars. We've got droids and machines and spaceships and stuff like that. It's like, I'm not saying you can't include electronic music. You have to do it really well, but you definitely can exclusively work with the orchestra for Star Wars, no matter how many droids you see. You don't have to go beep boop, bop, bop, beep boop. You know, if that happened in the 70s and 80s, we wouldn't be talking about Star Wars right now. Goran says about his he's saying this about his very complicated looking mixing board wall. Actually, it's not a mixing board. It's a arpeggiator patch modular synthesis, I think. Modular synthesizers. He uses to create a variety of sounds for his score. He also used a full orchestra to honor the Star Wars tradition and provide a more traditional sound on top of his experimental music. Now, here's the thing. He did work ultimately with the orchestra, but it doesn't sound like Star Wars. So you can't, just because you have an orchestra doesn't mean you sound like Star Wars. That's a ridiculous idea to have. I thought this was kind of sweet. His wife, who was pregnant with their child at the time, served as a concert for the show's recording. So she's a violinist. I feel like she should have given him a little bit more input. Favreau says the musical score is the lightning rod for Star Wars because it's the one thing all fans can agree on. Well, yes, we sort of agree on what Star Wars should sound like. At the same time, he didn't want to use familiar themes as a shortcut to get through to the audience. What does that mean? As a shortcut? Like, so for any living composer right now in my generation and younger, it would be the tallest order to give to us, to present to us in our career, to say, you need to sound like John Williams because you have to be a master. You have to be a master of music, like a complete top tier level 11 master of music. Final Fantasy, like the level 10, man, you're a level 11 red mage. So John Williams is level 11 red mage. He can do black and white magic. And I'm like, concerning the orchestra, I would be like a level 2. No, like a shortcut to get through to the audience. You know how that's such an insult to John Williams. It's like the hardest thing a composer could do this day and age is to sound like John Williams. It's no shortcut. It would be the longest journey you would ever embark on your musical career to sound like John Williams. Favreau, I don't know, knows music. Doesn't sound like it. And the thing is, if he's talking about copying John Williams, well, you could still imitate him and still be your own master of your craft. And copying musical themes of John Williams, you've got the right to use the themes, and then it's not cheating. It's like, oh, it'd be cheating if we used his themes. It's like, it's Star Wars. You've got the IP, man. Use it. Anyway. Man, it's almost midnight. Wow. Sheesh. This stream is long. All right, a couple more things. Goransson says, working on this scoring stage with orchestra is the best part of his job because up until the point he was working by himself. That's true as a composer. There is something really engaging and energizing working with professional musicians and having them play your score. It is quite fun. Let's see, another important point. Filoni gives another speech about how George Lucas built Star Wars from nothing and ties it into the discussion about the score by saying how they needed to take a chance with the music rather than repeat the things that John Williams had already done. Because George Lucas, with his new Star Wars movie in 1979, was so innovative and so experimental. Well, because of that, we've got to be experimental today with our music, right? No, Filoni, man, you make really weird relationships. Like, I think he one time said, like, Star Wars is not a linear story because the episodes were released in different order. It's like, it's still a linear story. He did say that in an interview. I can't remember which one. But this idea is like, oh, because George Lucas did this, we got to break away now from John Williams. It's like, no, you've got it established. You've got it established that, no, yes, you can be experimental, but you cannot completely depart from John Williams. So he's thinking that departing from John Williams is taking the same chance that George Lucas took as a filmmaker. Not the same. It's not the same. It's a very arbitrary relationship that he's piecing together. And then final bullet point says, Goransson says that he was first introduced to Star Wars through the music and that John Williams' scores also introduced him to classical music in general. So when he first saw Star Wars, he was first introduced to the classical music setting. John Williams is a classically trained composer and musician and conductor. If this is Goransson's first encounter with classical music, I would speculate then that he had not been classically trained. And he plays guitar, so that makes sense. He's in hip-hop and stuff like that and experimentalism. So anyway, I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, Filoni and Favreau and their reaction and their discussion on the music score is pretty telling that they don't really understand exactly what they want, which is very common for film producers and makers. They might say, hey, can you sound like this guy? And then you can produce something that doesn't sound like that guy, and they'll say, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want. Because I've seen that happen among composers. I've had that happen with me before. So very interesting things. So we'll wrap it up. And I'm getting tired. It's almost midnight. Wow. 2.5 hours, a 2.5 hour stream. So anyway, let's see what the chat is talking about, and then we'll wrap it up. We will wrap it up. Okay. I got because yes, Goransson has incorporated rapping, Wolf10. I better not hear no rapping in my Star Wars. Or dude, actually no. I did hear a track in The Mandalorian. I was like, no way. It sounded like beat making. There were no vocals, but it did sound like beat making. or any hip hop in my Star Wars. I can hear Wolf Ted's voice right now. I don't even care if the character is black. No hip hop in my Star Wars. Yeah, because the thing is, black characters in Star Wars are not black Americans. The white characters in Star Wars are not white Americans. There are no Filipinos in Star Wars. There are no Venezuelans in Star Wars. There's no anything based on planet Earth is in Star Wars. And I love science fiction that includes Earth as its history. I actually, in my space opera, I use last names that are common to us because it's implied later in the lore of my story. I hope my feet haven't been touching the cable. But anyway, it's implied that my story is way out into the future where Earth had been a past. So it's coming to have the same accents, speak the English language, or have the same surnames, common surnames, last names of people. So, but yeah, no hip hop in Star Wars, please. Like, not even in a bar. It's gotta just have a different feeling. But Lynn Green is interjecting, like, it might work. I think a kind of rap style, but it'd have to be so alien sounding. But no, if there's just too much of a resemblance to our culture here, it just doesn't work for Star Wars. It doesn't work. Oh, well, they don't have symphony orchestras in Star Wars, Michelle, so why are you not talking about that? It's like, well, because the orchestra actually, because of the history of film, the orchestra is actually able to carry you into the story and pull you out when it's done. All right. I agree if it could be tied to a certain species or group, like Indian Bollywood music playing in pirate cantinas in Clone Wars. Yeah, but if it had an Indian tone to it, it would have to be very experimental, where it doesn't really resemble Indian Bollywood. I get it, but I'm leaning more toward Wolf 10 and his caution. Oh, okay. I'm still scarred for contemporary music in my Star Trek in 1969. Forget about BC Boys. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Looks like we're following people. All right. Looks like people are saying goodnight. Oh, yeah. I actually mean literal Americans, not like American analog or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, because the Imperials, they had the British accent and stuff like that. Yeah. That's more analog, but just talking about like did America exist in Star Wars? Now people say, well, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, but that was Star Wars in the past. That's our past. Before America ever came to be. All right, my chair is making noises. It's actually not my chair. It's the prof's chair, but he's letting me use his chair. So anyway, I think that is everything what I want to talk about. I can't guarantee a fixed video this week because I just want to spend time catching up on work, teaching, composing, just looking over some stuff in SuperCollider. But we're going to carry on this idea of we're going to sort of pull away from the treatment of Star Wars music and then get into electronic music in general and where it works in film and television and where it does not, where it actually can be quite hazardous to implement. And I'm actually really excited about talking about this. It might be off the cuff, it might be an impromptu, but I love electronic music. I compose electronic music. I have albums on Spotify. I have albums on my website. Why don't I just do a shameless plug right now? And I have one EP coming up. I'm working on 4 tracks right now. Here we go. I have a four short tracks coming up, and they're little musical sketches. It's a complete beginning, complete end, and all of that. But I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, four sketches, musical sketches, based on a little bit more. It's got a more nature quality, more primitive quality, some percussive sounds that are earthy. It's got a earthy tone to it, but it's still experimental. It's still got kind of a futuristic tone. So I'll be working on those four tracks a little bit more this week. I'd like to get the album out next month. I just have to make a little bit more income to send some money to the mastering artist. But that is my website where you can check the current albums. And actually, I can share it too real quick. Go ahead and share it. Share screen. You see that? Yeah. So we've got my latest single, which was October. It's January now, so it's time to release some more stuff. Oh my gosh, my music update. I haven't been on my website apparently since October. Oh my goodness. I used to do it like once or twice a month. I just realized that. It's been a full holiday season. So I've got Uncharted here. I've got my albums here, and then I've got my singles here. And you can download these images to your liking. They're high quality images that I made myself. But yeah, I saw electronic music and getting better and better in my own quality. Sometimes I go back to my website and I think, I could have done that better, or that quality could have been better, or something like that. But you just release the stuff and get better as you go. You know, you always want the next project to sound just a little bit better in terms of quality and production and composition. So anyway, sorry, this chair is very squeaky. Anyway, I think that's a wrap. I think I don't have anything more to say. So I wish you guys just a really good rest of your week and happy creating. And I would just say, until I see you next, keep fighting for the truth on what's happening with our entertainment and keep producing, keep preserving, and promoting the art you love. And I will catch you later. Thanks again.